are already well into March, I think it's time for a journal update. I don't know about you, but the beginning of this year has been crazy chaotic, full of lots of good things, but I feel a severe lack of cozy hobby time, so I'm excited to put this together today. So in the month of February, I read 6 books, another kind of slower reading month for me, but a good reading month. I got into some series that I was excited about and picked up a couple random reads along the way. So let's get into all the updates, starting with my physical TBR. So 5 of the 6 books I read this month were not on my physical TBR, but one book I did have 2 copies on my TBR, and that is Forgery of Fate by Elizabeth Lim. I'm a really big fan of Elizabeth Lim's writing. She always immerses her stories deep within folklore and old fairy tales and brings them to life in a new way. So I, of course, needed to pre-order her latest book, which came out last year. And as part of the pre-order campaign, there was lots of artwork included. So we have some full-page illustrations, a bookmark, a little sticker, and of course some character cards. So I want to use some of this in my journal spread today. Also, can we talk about the stunning cover by Tran? Like, this illustrator is incredible, and the gold foiling in the dragon is just so stunning, and it complements the edges so much. One of the prettiest books on my shelf. And as if you could make this more beautiful, we have another stunning edition. I saw this Owl Crate edition and my jaw just fell on the floor. I absolutely loved it. It has stunning character art on the inside, and the case-bound cover is incredible. Like, look at that detailing on the pages. You've got even some silver foiled stars. Again, beautiful end papers. Just absolutely so stunning. And then they also, of course, included a reverse dust jacket. So I was definitely excited to add this copy to my collection as well. So having 2 of these books on my shelves for so long really pulled me into needing to read those. So I'm glad I finally read these in February so I can put these on my display shelf and take them off of my TBR shelf. For me, A Forgery of Fate was a 4.5 star, so I'm going to use this Tombow pen to mark my review of that one. I really enjoyed this book, but it wasn't quite as good as Spin the Dawn for me. I think that one is my favorite duology by Elizabeth Lim. On this page, I've just filled in all of the little details I like to track from the books I read, who narrates the audiobook, and whether I enjoyed the audiobook or not. This month, I listened to all audiobook, and all of them were amazing experiences. I traveled to a lot of new places and just overall had a really great time. While I did not buy any new books in February, I did find 3 more books that I did not include in my original count. This was a series that I purchased on Kickstarter, and I have not received the physical copies yet, but I did get the Kindle copies. So we're going to change this to 136, and I did not buy any new books. We're going to add Forgery of Fate to my TBR loyalty card. Something interesting about the milestones this month is that while I read more, they were about the same amount of hours overall audiobook. I have my first nonfiction story to add in. This is Peaky Blinders, The Real Story by Carl Chin. And this was a nonfiction pick that I just kind of added from NetGalley. It was available. It was like a 4.5 hour audiobook, and it was really short and sweet. I am a huge fan of the Peaky Blinders TV show, so any little extra details I can get about that world and those characters is phenomenal. So it was a fun read. I don't know that this is something I need to do a whole page spread on, and I don't think you need to read it unless you also are interested in the real Peaky Blinders. But it was a fun little short listen on one of my commutes to work. I'm also going to add Peaky Blinders to my orcs list, as well as Red Winter by Cameron Sullivan. I actually ended up DNFing this book. I got about 40% through, didn't know what was happening, went back, listened to it again, and just wasn't having a good time. So I'm sure someone out there will love it, but didn't work for me. But I can mark this off as having read this in February. I did not finish any physical books this month. However, I am deep into my tandem read for Throne of Glass. I do have an exciting update for my series tracker, and that is that I finally finished Red Rising Part 1. I also started a new series, which is Fire and Metal, which I believe is going to be a 3-book series, starting with Metal Slinger. We also just got some very exciting news that the ACOTAR series is being continued, starting, I think we get the first book in November and then another novella in January. So I am opening up one of these boxes to possibly finish that this year, and then adding another box, of course, for the added novella. In my Book Besties book club, we read The Last Secret of Lily Adams, and this was such a fun mystery taking place in Hollywood and jumping back and forth between the 50s and into our timeline now. And for my book babes, we chose Heated Rivalry. This, I'm sure you know, is not my cup of tea. So I basically just read the story parts and skipped all the spice, which left me with about 5% of the book overall. So I don't know if that counts as actually reading it, but I understand what is happening. So I was able to talk about it enough in our discussion. Getting into my reading challenges, I did not participate in any readathons, and I did read Metal Slinger and Forgery of Fate, which are both fantasy books, but I wouldn't really classify them as high fantasy, historical fantasy, or any of these categories. So we're not going to place those into this reading challenge. I am still on my journey to Mordor, but as of the end of February, I have not made it to Weathertop just yet. So we'll save that for next month's update. I do get to place my first sword on my sword studies page. Here is a book cover that just contains a sword as its illustration. Definitely a simple challenge, but a fun one. I'm excited to see this page fill up with a full armory of swords. I also want to give a quick shout out to my new friend Madeline. She gifted me this adorable wood carved sword bookmark, which is just stunning. This is by Owl Crate, as well as a pin. I believe this goes with Quicksilver. Yes, Quicksilver. I haven't read this yet, but I am excited to. And I just thought she's the sweetest. So in honor of my sword studies challenge, she gave me this cute little gift. So thank you again, Madeline. Love you. Bringing us to You're in Aldia. I decided to go south, which means I needed to pick a book from my bottom shelf. Since I had 2 copies of Forgery of Fate, one was on the top shelf and one was on the bottom. So I felt like that counted as a good option for February. Bringing us into our monthly reading reviews. The first book that I read in February is Metal Slinger by Rachel Schneider, and I wanted to dedicate my February cover page to this book. And I thought a perfect illustration for this is this beautiful illustration by Sibylinne. She's one of my favorite artists, and I went through kind of all of my different Patreon artworks by her, and I picked a couple for the spreads this month. And I didn't want to use the original, so I made a photocopy that I can put in my journal. I thought this illustration was perfect because not only is our main character a fiery redhead named Bryn, but she's also a metal slinger or a sword wielder, someone who has a magical ability to use metal weapons. So If you haven't read Metal Slinger yet, I highly encourage you to. This was a 5-star, very fun read for me. I would classify it as both adventure as well as romantasy. Our main character, Bryn, was orphaned at a young age and is being raised by a family who owns a ship. So she's kind of spent her whole life on this ship. She's got a small group of friends that she's just been raised with, and they're all very close. But one day they pull into this market and they're surprised by this treaty being broken by her presence in this now town. And a part of her identity is revealed, and she has to go on this hunt for what is the truth about her life, because a lot of what she's been told may or may not be true. She's got different people telling her different things. So that's how the story kind of launches off, and it was just a wild ride from there. It's one of those books that is very consumable, especially the audiobook. I felt like the narration was fantastic, and it just really kept you engaged with the story. For the decorations on this page, obviously the artwork by Sibylinne is doing the heavy lifting, but I paired that with a medievalish type of font for February. And for the Metal Slinger decorations, I kind of took inspiration from the cover of the book. It's very floral and colorful, so I'm using this PET tape by the Washi Tape Shop. I have two different tapes. The blue tape here is an older collection before they started doing what's called a kiss cut tape. So as you can see, I have to physically cut out the sections that I want to use, and you kind of have that shiny backing to the tape. So that's why I kind of stuck some of that underneath the turquoise paper. But I think you guys are getting kind of the heavier view of the glare in this situation. From my perspective, it's a little less glary. Then I figured out where I wanted to position the book cover. I think the top corner looked the best, and I think that, covers less of the page that I want to write on. And then finally, I'm going to stack a couple more brighter flowers on top to really pull in those oranges and yellows from the book cover. And this PET tape here is also from the Washi Tape Shop, but again, this is with their Kiss Cut feature. So I can pull each sticker that I want to use off like a sticker instead of having to cut each floral bit out. I love this feature. I feel like it makes their tapes so user-friendly, and you can really pick and choose the right items and elements for your spreads without feeling like you have to use the rest of the tape beforehand before you get to the spot on the tape that you like. And of course, adding a couple butterflies as a final touch, just again to match the cover. My next exciting reads were to continue the Red Rising series with Golden Sun and Morning Star. And again, I'm taking some inspiration from the book covers with some black paper in the background. And then I thought it'd be fun to take the symbols on each cover and kind of color them in with my sparkly watercolors. I've just had an urge to paint. We did some watercoloring at a baby shower recently, and it kind of gave me the bug. So I was like, look, I can paint some semicircles. I think I can pull this off. I'm not a, super talented painter by any means, but this was definitely easy enough to pull off for myself. So I'm just mimicking the cover here and leaving space in the center for me to write in my reviews. If you are not familiar with the Red Rising series, we are following our main character, Darrow, and he is what's known as a Red. In his futuristic dystopian society on Mars, there are different color factions, and it's kind of like a caste system where you've got your golds at the very top of the hierarchy, and then your reds are at the very bottom. So in Darrow's life, he's kind of given the opportunity to live in both worlds, and I don't want to say too much more about the story because this is one of those stories that lives with you forever, and the adventure is just so, so good that I really feel like you just got to go into it with an open heart and open mind and let the story move you the way it's going to move you. So, as it was with the first book, I gave that one a 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. I listened to the graphic audio, which was so immersive and fun. This story made me weep, and the first book more so, but the ending of Golden Sun, I was weeping. It was probably one of my most emotional experiences in a book. It was just so, so good. And then the ending of Morning Star was so incredibly wild. It's one of those books that, like, you're so immersed in, nothing else matters. You're going to stay up late until you get through it all. And it felt very much like that. I remember I was going for a walk and I was so close to being finished with Morning Star, and generally I go out for a walk for like an hour, and I walked for an hour and 40 minutes because I just needed to like be done with the story because I was just in it, and it's really unputdownable. It's so, so good. My final decoration on the page is just to slap some wet watercolor on the black to give it kind of a Starry Night effect, and then to write in the names of the books. I have really liked how it's looking with the book covers written out, and I think I want to start doing that more in my reading journal. The next book I read was A Forgery of Fate by Elizabeth Lim. I know I mentioned this a little earlier in the video, but really delightful story, and I loved that I got all this pre-order artwork. I forgot to press record for the first 10 minutes of the setup, so all I really did was paste in some of the decorations on top of some washi tape. And because I couldn't choose between all of the artwork that I wanted to use, I made this little flap so that I could have an inside page featuring the character art. And then I could still fit the illustration by Sibylinne because I just thought it was so, so fitting. So around the borders here, I have a tape, again from the washi tape shop, and I just think it fills in this area quite nicely with all the characters. And then I'll put my review here in that center section. And then on the right, I'm going to use that illustration by Sibylinne. I thought this was perfect for the story again because it really encapsulates our main character, True. She is a girl who has a magical ability to kind of paint the future. And she's got blue hair, and she is forced into a marriage of convenience with a dragon. Just like all of Elizabeth Lim's work, these are heavily rooted in fairy tales, and this story is a play on Beauty and the Beast, but there's also some Little Mermaid vibes mixed in. I really liked the little borders around the character art, so I wanted to recreate that around the page here. And when I tell you, my brain hurt after trying to replicate this. I didn't think drawing squares would be, too hard, especially because I have a dot grid paper. But for whatever reason, it was like boggling my brain and really confusing me. So this took me an embarrassing amount of time to figure out. But I thought the result turned out very, very cool. So I'm glad I went for it. And then I'm just filling in the title of the book with a amber Tombow marker. I really love how this spread turned out, and it just reminded me of the other book spreads that I've done for other books by Elizabeth Lim. They always end up so colorful and artistic and really kind of pull out some creativity in me, and I think that's very reflective of her writing style and her imaginative storytelling. So I love this spread. Now let's get into the last 2 books of the month. First, we have When I Kill You by B.A. Paris. This was another kind of impulse grab on NetGalley. I was drawn in by the cover. It's very simple, but you know, obviously very striking. So, and then I was also kind of pulled in by the synopsis. But this is a thriller book, and it is about a gal named Nell who is kind of coming out of a bad season in her life and she's starting over. Um, and she's getting to the point where she's, stopped looking over her shoulder, expecting, people from the past to show up, until that kind of sense of safety has been lifted because she starts to feel like she's being followed. And when the hairs on your neck start to tingle and you're just aware of someone's presence around you, that is very much the feeling that this whole book gives you. It was super engaging. It kind of flipped perspectives from Nell's present experience, and then we get little flashbacks to what she was going through in her, we'll call it her past life. And then we also get chapters from the person who is watching her, and it's always signed "When I Kill You," and that's kind of the edge of the book, but it was quite enjoyable for a thriller. I found this book very entertaining and engaging. I was definitely thrilled, and I'm kind of picky when it comes to thrillers. I don't like when there's this giant twist at the end that there's no way you could have seen coming. That kind of ruins a thriller for me, but this book is not like that. It was very practical. I had a lot of theories as to what was going on, and I was partially right, partially surprised, and I feel like that for me is a good recipe for a good thriller. I also found the main character to respond in a very believable way, which I feel like sometimes you don't get in thriller and mystery books anymore. For the decoration on this page, I am trying to recreate glass shards, which is what you see on the cover here. It's a shard of glass in the shape of a knife, but that's a pretty impactful scene in this book, is, these glass shards. So I wanted to recreate that in a colorful way. So I'm just using some iridescent paper, and then finishing it off with some text for the cover in blood red. And the last book I want to talk about is The Last Secret of Lily Adams. This was our book club pick for my book besties, and it is a bit of a historical fiction, but I would say it's more so a mystery, and it's told in a dual timeline, which is my favorite. So we have Lily Adams, who is a starlet in the 50s. She is an incredible dancer and she's making her way into more acting roles and really doing, the Hollywood thing. And then it flashes forward to her granddaughter, who is coming to kind of sort through her things after her passing. And as they're kind of sifting through everything and deciding, what to keep, what to donate to a museum, they come across a necklace that belonged to a different actress, who tragically died in a semi-mysterious way. So the mystery kind of launches off from there, and they're trying to figure out the connection, of this other actress to the grandmother. Um, and then we get little stories from Lily herself, kind of telling you what actually happened in her time. So it's a little bit of a flip back and forth. I had a really great time reading this story. I thought it was super sweet, and I always love a good family mystery, especially when you're kind of solving it together with your daughter or sister, like in this case. I wish there was more to this book. I felt like it was a little too short. There were a couple things that I don't think she wrapped up entirely, but I think she wrapped up enough to where it's a very enjoyable story on its own. I just wish there was a little bit more to the romance, and a little bit more of a connection between the grandmother and the granddaughter. Um, I felt like the description of the relationship was a little bit brief. And so I wasn't quite sure that I understood or believed the connection between the two of them. They were supposed to be very close, but we really didn't get any like examples of that. So that's why I'm going to give it a 4-star, but I did really enjoy my time in this book. So enjoyability, a 5. And that's all I've got for the reading reviews today. Let's hop into the final flip, and thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.